The Fosi Audio K5 Pro Mini Stereo Gaming DAC is directly aimed at the entry-level, gamer-focused audiophile. As a foreword, I've been using the K5 Pro exclusively at my desktop, so this review will be based around its USB functionality. I do not own any products with optical or coaxial output, so that will not be part of this review. So, what makes the K5 Pro stand out from the crowd, especially at this price point, is its solid range of audio inputs, including a 3.5mm front microphone port for headsets. However, what truly stands out for me in a product at this price point is the inclusion of bass and treble tone controls. More on those later. I get the impression that most of the cost went under the hood of this product. It comes with a pretty ordinary aluminium shell, however it is tastefully finished with the front facade perfectly matched with the body, and the text is fairly well subdued on my silver grey version. Upon very close inspection, I only found one tiny flaw with the build quality. The volume control knob does feel a tiny bit loose, so it feels something like mechanical backlash before the turning actually takes control of the sound. In practice, you're really not going to focus on this at all if you're just making quick adjustments on the fly while gaming or listening to music. Realistically, in the past month, I've never even noticed it once. The rubber feet are a nice addition that I wasn't expecting on a product at this price point. However, they don't prevent the unit from sliding around on my glass monitor stand base, but I still greatly appreciate the scratch protection. Compared to other products I own, the blue LED is quite bright and might be distracting for some people if placed close by or directly in front of you. I found it to be a bit distracting late at night for the first week, but after a while I got used to it. But it's something to consider, and you may prefer to have it off to one side of the desk to avoid this issue. And finally, due to the small size of the unit, some might find that it's impossible to turn the control knobs without raising the unit off its resting surface. Mine was perched a little higher off my desk on the edge of my monitor stand base, so that was a non-issue for me. On the rear of the unit, the cinch output sockets and coaxial input sockets are fine. They don't have an obnoxiously strong hold over plugs like I've experienced with some other RCA sockets. The USB-C port is also okay. The cable doesn't seat perfectly snugly, but this is a common theme I've noticed even on mobile phones that cost hundreds of euros. So for a stationary desktop unit, this is more than acceptable. Installing the DAC was as simple as plug and play. However, it will need a dedicated USB port for power. It will not turn on if it has to compete for power through a passive USB hub. At first I plugged it into my keyboard USB pass-through, but it wouldn't turn on. After installing, it does not behave differently to other DACs I've used in the past with Microsoft Windows. The front microphone input port is also a welcome addition. While its audio quality is highly dependent on the microphone quality on your headset, I tested it and found it worked correctly without adding any background hissing. It's safe to say that the K5 is able to drive most common headphones and headsets to excessive listening volume with ease. I threw quite a few of my headphones at it to see what would stick, and it was able to drive all of them to uncomfortably loud listening levels, even my Hi-Fi-Man HE500 and Sennheiser HD650. However, I feel that it struggled to render the sound as competently as more powerful amplifiers could. I noticed it especially failed to produce convincing dynamics with large planars, which are notoriously power hungry. Even my KZ HBB PR2 IAM preferred a source with more headroom. Also, as with some of my more demanding dynamic headphones like my JVC HADX1000, it was not able to control sub-bass texture with as much authority as I'm used to. One thing to note is that most headphones I tested sounded like they were lacking body despite the adequate volume output. I think one of the main factors for this particular evaluation is that the K5 Pro appears to be on the leaner side of neutral, with upper mids being slightly more forward and bass slightly reduced compared to other amps I own. Of course, this only takes into consideration the K5 Pro's performance when no tone control is applied. I measured 3 random dynamic headphones on the K5 Pro and on my Audio GD NFB11.28 TXO, and the results confirm my evaluation consistently despite variation in headphone output load. I think this is neither a good thing or a bad thing. One only has to ask how much does this matter on a unit that comes with its own tone controls. Personally, it matters little. With the negative points out of the way, here comes the good news. This DAC seems to excel with sensitive dynamic driver headphones. The differences between this unit and more expensive amps become far more incremental. The bigger surprise for me was how well it took to driving my Sony MDR SA3000. This headphone, in combination with the K5 Pro, sounded practically no different to my NFB11.28 TXO, but the really impressive part is that adjusted treble and bass with the K5's tone controls sounded less compressed and more lively than the NFB11.28 TXO with equalizer APO, and I find that this is a common drawback of using digital EQ. Sometimes necessarily excessive EQ results in digital compression that doesn't sound as lively or realistic as it should. Those who know the SA3000 are aware that it is a detail and treble monster with a weak bass response. Correcting those flaws to my taste on the K5 Pro was so simple and brought my SA3000 to another level of enjoyment. For context, here are the measurements of the Sony MDR SA3000 through the K5 Pro with various tone control settings. In practice, the tone controls offer adjustment up to around plus or minus 15 decibels in the bass and about plus or minus 9 decibels of treble correction. In my opinion, this is more than enough for most headphones, as demonstrated by it easily correcting the notorious SA3000. I believe the correction curve of both treble and bass do not distastefully intrude into the mid-range, and is an outstanding additional feature at this price point. However, I don't recommend using the tone controls to their extremes. I noticed that max bass volume will introduce mild distortion. For bass heads, I would still recommend using EQ APO as a primary source of tone control. Also, the minimum bass volume seems to introduce some weird artifacts, but at this greatly reduced volume, you likely wouldn't hear any of those artifacts anyway, so it's really a moot point. So, in conclusion, I think there's a lot to like about this little guy. It's a really well thought out selection of inputs, outputs, and functionality to get anyone started on their audio journey. I find that most of its drawbacks are really just me being spoiled by bigger, more powerful amps, and it also proved to me that even a small DAC can still synergize with the right equipment, and after all these years, change the way I listen to some headphones. It's truly great to see tone controls on a tiny amp at this entry level. This is the kind of feature that would prevent people from overspending on many different headphones for every different album, genre, and video game. Instead, you just need to dial in your preferred tone, setting, or adjust as you go without having to reach for a different headphone for every occasion. Okay, it's not a reference grade unit, but I could certainly have used this around 15 years and 400 headphones ago, and I have no trouble making a recommendation. If absolute peak audio quality isn't a concern, even to seasoned audiophiles who just need a small, affordable, and versatile unit for their gaming console, this is certainly an option worthy of consideration. I'll see you in the next one.